So before we start the discussion, I'm so happy to see that you're all so deeply engaged in discussions of your own. But before we start, I'm just going to say a quick thank you to the volunteers that donate their time to make Open Cinema happen. Volunteers make the world go round. And I would like to say a big thank you to the following folks: Jack Fisher, Eleanor Calder, Alan McClash, Joseph Konkovic, Holly Patterson, Robert and Susan Thompson, Elizabeth and Donald Asner Stewart, Bill Wilson, Angela Hemming, Mary Lou Wakefield, Brent Howard, and Herman Silker. Thank you so much to those folks for helping. If you have any desire to join our very happy team in one way or another, there's all kinds of tasks both at the events and in between events that we need help with. So hopefully you got a feedback form when you came in the door. We welcome your feedback, and you can leave us your email address and let us know if you're interested in volunteering. And we'll add you to our new newsletter called Doc Talk. Is anybody part of our new newsletter on our newsletter list? Anybody in the room? Really nice. Oh yes, one. Do you like our new newsletter? It's a bit of a leading question, I know, but we're very excited about our new MailChimp newsletter. A big thank you to Open Cinema is a program of MediaNet, and I want to say thank you to the MediaNet team who are always paddling madly behind the scenes to make this work. Peter Sandmark, big thank you. The executive director of MediaNet, up in the booth. Kurt Schwartz, also there, he's the tech guru. And Caitlin Lewis, I've for a moment forgot her name. How can that be? Caitlin, who is always doing all kinds of great things. Thank you so much. So thanks to our sponsors, Band City, Capital Regional District Arts Development Program, BC Arts Council, Canada Council, Think Street Media, Hemp & Company, Buddy Rose's Bakery, Stonewood Coffee, The Joint Pizza, and Infused Tea. So thank you to those folks. And thank you to you. Your donations at the door make up at least 25% of our annual budget. So we really appreciate your support. Thank you very much for coming out. So as a thank you, we do have a couple of door prizes, courtesy of Habitat Acquisition Trust. And I'm just going to pull a couple of those numbers. Do you have your tickets? Has anybody got a drum roll? So the first prize, door prize, is a beautiful topographical map. Peter, Adam, do you want to say anything about this map? Is there a Peter and an Adam in the room? Oh, Todd will tell us about the map. So, tell us about the map.
It's actually an orthophoto. It's just produced by the Galliano Conservancy, and it shows a vast plume of sediment-laden water smashing into the southern Gulf Islands, driving the huge ecological change that we have here in the southern Gulf Islands and southern Vancouver Island. And there's some seed packs in there too.
Oh, I was going to use this as a mic. So the last three numbers, so you're going to get the topographical map, 238. Do we have 238 in the room? Woohoo! Yay! Nice. And while Todd is bringing the map over there, I'm going to pick another number, and that lucky person is going to get a hat t-shirt with also some more seed packets. And I suspect the t-shirt is self-explanatory. So the last three numbers, 264. Oh, we have a winner. Great. Woohoo! Oh, it's Michelle. Nice. All right. So our next film next month is Occupy Live. Hopefully there's a handbill on your table or somewhere nearby. We're very excited about that event. December 5th. In fact, Michelle, who just won the t-shirt, will be one of the speakers. It wasn't rigged. But it's the Victoria premiere of Velcro Ripper's film about the new revolution that is taking over our planet, the positive one, the one that's about love. So we hope you'll come to that, but we do recommend that you get advance tickets for that. So now I'd like to introduce Rick Cool, Dr. Rick Cool, who's going to be moderating the post-screening discussion this evening. We're very happy to have him here. He's dedicated his career to biology, zoology, and environmental education. He is the Environmental Education Coordinator for the BC Ministry of Environment and coordinated park interpretation with BC Parks before joining Royal Roads in 2003, where he established the MA in Environmental Education and Communication. And he currently works in ways that relates to ways that environmental education confronts hope and despair, and the potential role and place of religion in environmental education, and the conceptions of change in environmental education and communication. So we're very lucky to have him here tonight. Please welcome Dr. Rick Cool. There you are. Welcome.
Good, and I'll just call the rest of the folks up here. So, well, totally interesting film. Wonderful. Thank you for inviting me, Mandy, to be part of it. Maybe I'll sit down because it feels awkward standing up here. If I sit down, I'll sit on a tray. So, yeah, check this first. That's okay. It's very good. So we have three people who are going to join us tonight to be up here to say a few words, and then to really have you folks, offer ideas. You'd like to get as many ideas. I'm from Boston, so you have to excuse that I inadvertently put R's at the end of certain words, and then I hear myself speaking like from my homeland. So as many people who'd like to get to speak as possible. Sometimes the folks up on the stage here will respond. We also know there are folks out on Twitter and out in the live webcast, and we encourage them to post Twitter, post tweets, and however else people can get information in to us. We'd love that, and we'd also love the folks out in the web to let us know what they're thinking, and we can maybe respond to that. So first, I'd like to introduce Lisa Lockerbie. So Lisa, why don't you come on up and then we have Todd. I got Todd's last name. Yes, I know. Come on, everybody try it. Canahan, and then David. Where's David? David Siegel here. So Lisa is the teacher at the new Nature Kindergarten in Creek at Sandstreet Elementary School. Todd is an educator and many other things with the Habitat Acquisition Trust. And David Siegel works with Power to Be and does outdoor recreation therapy. And what I'd like to start with, just briefly for each of these people, is just to pose one question. You can think of it as well, answers, and then we'll just move the microphones. We have one up here for these three folks. And then there is someone with a microphone out in the darkness there. Great. And then so if you're interested in making a comment, asking a question, Peter will, or someone will be running around with a microphone. We'd ask you to wait until you get the microphone to speak so that the folks on the net can hear what you're saying. So the question really is, not in any theoretical way, but in a personal, practical way, what is all this stuff that you've just seen, what does this mean to you? Not theoretically, but personally. Maybe we'll start with David and then just work our way down to Lisa.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming out. Can you hear me okay back there? I just wanted to say that I think it's so wonderful that Open Signal put this on and invited all of us to be here and all of you to attend. And I work for Power to Be Adventure Therapy Society. Maybe show of hands if you've heard of us. In Victoria, Austin. We've been around since 1998, and Tim Kermode, the executive director, and we're really in the business of trying to provide opportunities for people to go outside and be inspired to find their limitless abilities in nature. So it's an honor to be here representing them, and actually the whole team is up on Cortez Island right now and immersing themselves in a wilderness retreat. So I'm happy to be representing them. And in terms of that great question, for me in the work that I do as an ecotherapist, someone who's involved in the reciprocal healing of both my own health and the health of those I work with and the natural world, for me it's really about story, as I think as David Suzuki put so well. And story being, what are the stories we're telling about ourselves, how do we come about with the knowledge of what those stories are, how are those stories
proliferated and reinforced. And so in this movie, I saw the story radically change for these youth. The notion of ecological identity, I'm trying not to get theoretical here, but I did spend a lot of time.
You're not supposed to get theoretical.
I know, oh. But how is it that we relate to the natural world, and how does that then unfold into our own story of how we see ourselves? And I see the role of adventure and risk in terms of challenges, and how those kids were able to put themselves in situations where they could overcome things that they might not have known. That then fits their story. That one youth who was kind of talking about control, and how in the video game world there's so much control, all of a sudden there wasn't a lot of control. How does that fit our story in terms of how we see ourselves in the flux and chaos of natural systems, which we know are constantly in flux? That is what the status quo is. So yeah, for me, identity is kind of the big piece, and I see that as part of these roles, providing opportunities for people to reclaim and remember themselves in the membership of the natural community or their social community, and see in the ways that their identity can shift to ones that they prefer. And I think that nature is a beautiful way for us to kind of remember ourselves with the larger natural world and really our earthly home, which is ourselves and the natural world we live in. Like that.
Thank you, David. You know, I think the idea of someone said in the movie that it's like you put kids under house arrest, which is really a way of protecting them from risk and encouraging them to have the pseudo control of these risks you're doing. So risk and control really, I think, were an important part of the movie to me. Todd, what did you think? Personally, not theoretically.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed that movie. I thought it was about the right length. And personally, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of children have that aha moment where they're a little tentative at first, and then when they get their hands dirty, and they just throw their caution to the wind, and they just have a great time. And the way I've been able to experience that is through we've got lots of programs at HAT, which is a small regional land trust. Been around since 1996. I've been with the trust since 2005, and through my outreach services to the community, both the Green Spots program for schools, the Good Neighbors program for landowners, as well as our species at risk outreach, the turtles, snakes, and slugs. I've met many people, interviewed many people in their homes, and figured out what is it that made them come out and live here, or if they've lived here for a long time, why do they continue to live here? And I've learned probably more from the people that I've gone out to help than I've taught them. But one thing I can say is that having been a child myself, I was a kid who spent all my time slogging around in the creek chasing turtles. And I knew that the kids that were playing basketball at the school were missing out on something really big. They didn't want to get their feet wet or dirty. And I've been able to get thousands of kids digging holes on their own school grounds and putting plants in the ground, and many of those children have never done that before. And that's when you see the light bulb click in their head, like, hey, I can do this, and I want to do it again. I know I can remember the first tree that I planted. It was about as tall as I was. Not quite a tree at that point. It was a black walnut tree. Planted it in the wrong spot. It took about 15 years for it to start growing, but the day I harvested walnuts off that tree was another aha moment for me. And I want every child in our region to have that experience. And that's what I get from this movie, is I can see that it doesn't take much. You just have to get them out of that corporate stream and put them into the real world and let them learn on their own. Don't try to teach, just reveal and get that spark of curiosity going. It may already be there, and you can blow on that and create a fire, and if it's not there, you can light a fire underneath them and get them all going.
Hi there, my name is Lisa, and I'm the Nature Kindergarten teacher for the pilot project in the Peak School District. And personally for me, I had a lot of connections with the film. First of all, I'm working with younger children, so it's a little bit a lot different. Play is first and foremost the most important thing with the age where I'm looking. Um, um, I just, the parents who chose this program for their children, they're sitting long lineups and waited. And the reasons for the children to be, they wanted their child to be in this program were very different. Some of them are really wanting their children to have something different. They live in a condo, they don't get out camping, their lifestyles aren't like that, so they wanted to have that experience for their children. There was other families who didn't feel that the regular school system would be a good fit for their child, and so they thought that maybe nature kindergarten might provide that good fit where they could be really part of the community. There were some parents who were very fearful that their child or children were going to become addicted to video games and that screen time, and they were really worried that they were already going down that road. So the reasons for them joining the program was varied. But what I can say is that I work really closely with an early childhood educator, and we go into the woods every single day. And the children, the learning that happens is absolutely amazing. They are excited to be out there every day. Anne and I could plan nothing, and they would plan everything, and that's what happens most days. They're excited about everything, the slugs, the spiderwebs, the trees. They want to know the names of all the trees. They want to know how they're different than the other ones. They want to figure out, we go down to the stream quite often, and they want to find out what's living in there. And we found freshwater shrimp, and we learned about the trout, and that the salmon can't swim up the salmon can swim up the stream way better than the trout, and they're just so engaged, and the play is so rich. They get outside, and they are, like, a kid can do anything outside, right? So there's no pre-made toys, so the play is just so rich, and the problem solving, and the community that's being built out there is like in no classroom that I've ever been in. They take care of each other. They're empathetic. They take care of nature. It is just amazing. So just seeing that clip of older children was really, really interesting for me to see as well, that it happens at that older ages as well.
Wonderful. Are there questions or comments that you'd like to make? Just put up your hand and we can get the... we have some already, right by the microphone, yeah.
I know that my question is very likely to seem judgmental or censorious, etc. But I'd like some feedback from anyone at all, because I am so perplexed as to why parents allow their kids to spend so much time with what seems to me, frankly, really evil corporate manipulation. The worst possible gender roles, the hideous, sickening violence. I mean, it seems to me inevitable that it's going to be very warping for them, and I just don't get it. Just as I don't understand why parents are so terrified of letting their kids walk around by themselves outside, walk to school. I just don't get it.
Yeah, if you want to jump in as to a social psychological explanation of why our society is so goofy.
Well, I can't pretend to have the answer to that one, that's for sure. But I can say that in some of the families that I work with, so these are families that are marginalized in our communities and encountering many challenges, and so our programs are trying to reconnect them and their families through nature-based activities with their strengths. Oftentimes they're just so exhausted, and the kids are so inundated with these highly addictive video games that it gives us some respite. And it's almost like they're being blown up by this world that we live in. And so I think, for me, I recognize the role that parents have, and I also see the challenges that parents have. And so I know that sometimes there's a sigh of relief in the parents' eyes when I hold that sort of perspective with them, that, how can I stand in solidarity with you with this insane world? Your kids are being fed these video games, And so it's not really about just can you set more boundaries or limits or can you get your kids outside, but rather what are the larger contextual factors that are making it so appealing and so hard for you to be spending time with your kids.
We live in a time that's safer than any other time. But we also live in a time that has more corporate control and manipulation than any other time. And everybody here knows that screen is an addiction like any other. And that addiction keeps feeding us fear in order to self-perpetuate, to the point where we're afraid to let the kids go outside. There's going to be wackos and rapists and thieves and everybody hiding in the bushes. And, I spent my entire childhood in the woods and I never saw anybody. And yet today, there are these very, very strong irrational fears being perpetuated through media. And it's not the kids that have nature deficit disorder, it's us. And we're preventing them from having a real experience.
So the question, which is a perfectly good one, and this film, it's really much less in some ways about simply getting kids outside. And there's a much deeper critique of what's going on in our society that needs to be made. And so the last question I was going to ask at the very end of all this was, so what do we do? Because I don't think there's any other reason for getting together if there isn't some action that comes with it. So maybe we'll get to that point at the end. The diagnosis of the symptoms are really important. And that's what we're sort of asking about. Why are these things happening? Why is the world the way it is? But I think we also have to, once we do that, we have to decide, now what are we going to do? And we'll go to Lisa and then we'll have another. And we won't normally go through all the speakers, but they're so keen here that we'll do that. And then we'll go on to other questions. And if there's anything coming in from the people on the web, we'd love to make sure that we get their questions read out loud and then reflected on the show. Go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say that I don't think that it's necessarily just screen time. I know I have family members with children and friends with children, and their lives are just so busy, and they don't have time to do anything. The children are in organized sports and music lessons, and there is no time for that free play. And I noticed when I get them for the day, I get to hear them, and this is the nephews or friends' kids, and hear them, we just play, and they're at first not really quite sure what to do because it's different for them. They don't have that free time, that time to be creative. So it's us making time for that in their lives.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the issues of speed and pace and time and freedom, I felt a lot of what I was seeing on the screen was really about freedom in some ways, and about these teens, these kids going from being children to becoming sort of young adults. It was almost as if you could watch in their faces they were having a chance to be the free children that they might have missed through their enslavement to our mass culture. And that freedom was very beautiful to watch in some of their faces. We have still the microphone out there. I'm having to, up in the front here, with some folks here, gentlemen in the front. And then we'll come over to you next. Okay.
Is Ministry of Education doing anything to promote this kind of outdoor education above and beyond what they've done in the past, or is it all pretty much status quo?
I'll make one short point. I was trying to figure out who the new town foreman was for School District 61, and I started looking on the school district website. We've got a plan for improving the outcomes for children up to 2017. And I thought, okay, well, let's see, what have they got planned for nature education in this document? Well, I looked up nature, I looked up trees, I looked up gardening, I looked up outdoors, nothing. I finally found a greening strategy, school greening committees, and their version of environmental education is about getting kids to sort out their trash and getting kids to, what was the other thing, sort out trash and calculate their carbon footprint. That's it.
So to speak slightly on behalf of the Ministry of Education, although I've never worked for them and have often fought with them, they are really, there's a major shifting that's going on in the ministry with the new, it's more, they're getting wilder than I've ever seen the Ministry of Education getting. Looking at interdisciplinary stuff, there is a tremendous interest in environmental education as a potential tool for crossing a lot of traditional disciplinary boundaries. This really may be, in fact, we're having a conference in Victoria at the end of June of the Canadian Environmental Education and Communication Network, and we're really going to look at this as a way of trying to examine what could we do? How can environmental education be a tool for transformation, even in the little small ways that government might want to see it? But I think another thing you could see on the positive side is the Smith School District, through the work of some really imaginative administrators, said, yeah, let's do this nature kindergarten. And we anticipate, while they are the first, they clearly should not be the last. And as far as we can tell, there's no obstruction to this initiative that's happened. It's a pilot. And there are other people in the room here who could speak much more knowledgeably about the policy side of it. But, I think what LISA is part of is really, hopefully, the first step, because these kids are coming to the nature kindergarten, well, they're not going to want to sit in a four-walled classroom in grade 1. And so the hope is that this is a movement of parents and kids to change the way you see primary education, at least. Yes. Hi. So the point was, someone was saying that the first generation immigrants, parents, the outdoors is about here. That's the way I grew up. My parents are from the Netherlands. They don't know about outdoor stuff. But even in an urban environment, even as I grew up in Boston with dandelions, poison ivy, and dog shit, that was wilderness for me. And that was enough to turn me into a biologist and to get me excited. So I think we don't have to talk about wilderness experiences for kids, but it's really becoming aware of the nearby nature, which Luke talked about. What's close by, I think, is you have to open kids up to what's available to them where they are, and nature is every place. We had a comment up here. We need the microphone back if we can. And thank you for your patience.
I'm really conflicted by the film because I grew up on the west coast of the island with lots of nature, and we lived in an environment on the island, generally speaking, where we have access to it. But I think that there's two issues. There's the issues of access to nature, and there's the issues of how do we help our children and ourselves realize that we're competent caring individuals. And that's not anything new. I mean, school systems all the way from Piaget through Montessori through the Waldorf system in Germany, where we learn to manipulate and be creative. So how can we do that too? Because it's not within everybody's school view to be taking their kids out into nature, or, we might not all be able to grab the neighborhood kids and go out into nature either, right? So what can we do to ensure that people learn how to be competent and resilient?
I don't want to hog the mic. But there's a brochure here from Coyote Park. They have amazing parks interpretation. Now we know that BC Parks isn't doing that anymore. But Coyote Park is doing a great job. And if you can get your children out to those events, those are wonderful. And all of us know somebody who likes to take their family hiking on a regular basis, so send your children out with them. But go to your school and ask your school, what are you doing to get the children outside of the classroom and learning in reality? Because I know that I wasn't listening when I got inside the school. When we went on field trips, I had a heightened awareness. And liability concerns today have shut down those types of field trips. But field trips don't have to be everybody getting into a car that has $2 million insurance. They can be a walk down the street to the local park. And what we do through the Green Spots program is to take a look at that school ground and give people opportunities, ideas on what they can do with the school ground. You might be able to plant this area. You might be able to steward that Dairy Oak meadow on the knoll over there. You might be able to work with the Parks Department over at the park over there to maintain the park. And so there are a multitude of opportunities if you just show people what they are. So changing policies at the schools is a really big thing. But maybe some of you others here have some ideas as well.
Just recently I've been to 2 workshops for teachers, and both of them were attended by about 300 teachers. And all of them were very excited to get their children outside. And we're gaining ideas and learning that you don't have to know a lot about the wilderness. You don't have to know the names of all the plants. You don't have to, you just have to know how to be safe. Like we always talk about the risk assessment and everything with them before going out into nature with your kids. But I think the movement is growing. Teachers want to get their children outside. They know that when they learn best. And so hopefully with more things like this, more conferences, more people talking, it'll just spread.
I think you make a really important point there, and then we'll go maybe up to the back here, the next microphone. Because it's not, I mean, you can grow up in a place like you feel it and be completely environmentally ignorant. Right? Contact with nature may not be sufficient, but there's an orientation of caring that I think is the message that people like Lisa give when they take their kids outside. It's not just that they're outside, but that they're outside and they're connected and caring for these places in as much as they're exploring and playing in creativity. I think if you think simply putting people outside in our present cultural soup is going to be sufficient, I don't know if that's really true. But immersion and some meta message about how do we care for these places and what's our connection to these places. I think that's maybe really what we might be needing. Okay, we'll go David, and then we'll go to the question in the back there, and then we'll come back on.
Yeah, I think I just have 2 points that I want to add to that. One on the point of resiliency. I think in the nature-based adventure programs that I run, so much of our work is about allowing children and youth and families to make mistakes and to fail or to fall and to learn how to pick themselves back up. Like resilience means the ability for the system to bend and not break. And so there's a theory called the theory of affordances, and not to get too theoretical, but I love this theory because you've got like a sidewalk or a playground, and in the monkey bars, for example, and everything is geometrically the same, and everything is predictable, and there's so much control there. And then you say you take a tree, or you take an uneven path. And so nature environments afford opportunities for children and youth and families that aren't there in the built environment. So just coming to that point of you don't have to venture far to afford our children, youth, and families with amazing opportunities for growth and development.
Thanks. Yes, it's very good. And back there, right, there they had the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Michelle, and I have been an environmental and outdoor educator for most of my career. And I wanted to follow up on something I think I heard a previous question come forward with that. What about those families who don't have a strong value or concern for getting outside, who could grow up in the cooler and not have a clue, right? And how do we then create a resilient, caring, empathetic person? That there's a lot of programs and education systems that do that. I wanted to say I wear a hat teaching a program called Roots of Empathy, where we go into the school systems and we develop an emotional literacy language. And there's I won't go into the details of that, but I wanted to say that a lot of people are thinking about this from a lot of different angles. And having been an outdoor educator myself and what I do with my own child, the outdoors can be a tool, and I think I'm hearing that from the panel as well. But it brings together a lot of different disciplines, and it creates an opportunity for a child to be whole. And that's one way to access learning responsibility, caring for each other, taking risks, doing assessments. That's one tool, but there are a lot of other tools that are out there. So I was wanting to address that part of the question. And then to also follow up on the question from the first speaker who was saying, what are the parents doing allowing this? And I think that is the deeper question. It really, really is, because there's many answers to that. And how do we, as a society, I almost am curious, put up your hand, not even if you have children yourself, but if there's a child in your life, have you been outside with them in the last month? Raise your hand. So that's pretty exciting. So we have a really active group right here discussing this. And that's how it moves forward. That's how we solve the problem. I think it's easy to blame, if you will, the video games, the corporate environment, whatnot. But what we really need is community. We really need an engaged, caring population like here that says, we're going to come up with a lot of different solutions. We're going to start an outdoor school. We're going to find ways to get money to people so they can get kids outside. Those are the barriers. How do you get your kids to trust that it's safe to go out in the backyard with a neighborhood? How do you help two working parents who are working 12-hour days and are exhausted when they get home? These are really, really big questions.
Empowered by who's in the room, because this is not what it looks like. It doesn't look like doing a study and demanding that administrative education, putting it. We are the solution right here. So I guess it was more commentary than a question.
Other hands up. I was looking over here. We ignore the side here, my blind spot. But not a blind spot. And don't go back one.
My comments kind of follow up what you're saying there. And in terms of the question about what Ministry of Education is doing, I think before we ask that, maybe we need to look at what we can do. And I think there's an incredible group of educators out there, but they need support. My son's not in school yet, but when he was in school, I certainly don't. The time to provide our support to the educators.
Very nice. I think we do. And I think this ultimately is our political decisions. Sue really stepped right up to the plate. The super totally into this just a little more than a year ago we announced it, right, in October. And here we are. Victoria needs to do the same. You have a comment back there?
Question from
Great. Question from the ether.
Yes, not the ether.
Not
Twitter sphere.
Twitter sphere.
The Twitter sphere. This is from Liz, and she says, there is evidence that putting kids out there not teaching leads them to care about nature.
Putting kids out there and not teaching
Encourages them to connect with nature, care for nature.
There's this idea that we, as helicopter parents, have to keep on top of things.
To switch sometimes.
Your child is always on a regimen of.
Pardon?
Some
No,
sort of
I switched
curriculum.
inputs.
Keep keep feeding them, keep them focused. But it's that unstructured play that they're missing out on. And the unstructured play is where they come up with the curiosity and the creativity that's really going to develop their minds and allow them to be free from the control that they're trying to shrug off when they're always inside that cell, inside the house, with the screen telling them what to think and defining their world for them. So it's that unstructured play outside, unsupervised, that really is the key.
I think Outdoor Liz has a really good point in your commentary, and you could stack up the current peer-reviewed, really hardcore research literature that talks endlessly about the importance and the benefits of engagement with nature for kids, from ADHD to learning to all sorts of things. But as pointed out a few times already, the translation of that research into the practical work of schools and of families is not yet something we're good at doing. And I think the political work that you talked about is really important. We have a microphone somewhere? So when we go in the back corner over there, I see a hand up in the back corner there, and we'll keep you running, and then we'll come back down here.
That's good. I actually just wondering if you think there is any danger in the conversation kind of happening between sort of setting technology and nature as oppositional. Is that happening? And what are your thoughts on it if it is?
I was just talking about the unit over there. We were just discussing how that we don't necessarily think that technology is a bad thing. In fact, I think it's an amazing thing. And a lot of kids can do some really cool, creative things, and you can actually marry the two. Give children's cameras when they're outside. Let them take pictures. Let them make videos. Let them explore with the technology as well as the nature as well. I don't think that they're two separate things at all. I think they're things that can be, when combined, a very powerful tool.
I don't carry field books anymore. They're on my smartphone.
Yes. I have a friend who's incredibly versed in kind of media and the tech world. He has a website called amongnature.ca. His name's Emrys. And he's really grappling with this challenging topic, but right there is a good example where he's trying to archive all the parks that are across the different jurisdictions, so BC parks, Canada parks, and municipal parks in an online forum. And so there's an example. He's constantly saying himself, here I am programming all day long, but what my heart's wanting is to get people connected. So I like the permaculture principle of appropriate technology and thinking about how we as guides for you, and what's our role in terms of mentoring that. So with that question earlier about unstructured play, I fully believe in unstructured play. I also believe in guided facilitation. Many of us are familiar with that book, Lord of the Flies. And there's an example of, you take a group of people that are fully removed from the natural world, and there is potential for them to perhaps not be interacting in life-serving ways. So what is the role of educators or parents to provide rites of passage and experiences of challenge and learning and development, so that when they are out playing, learning, and discovering, they have a sense of how they might do that in a way that is life-serving rather than tearing each other apart?
I think it's a really important point. This question of we can't demonize easily technology, Aristotle talked about the golden mean. So what's the mean here between where does technology become abusive of us and abusive of the world, and where is the addiction? When people talk about addiction, it's a psychological phenomenon of craving and desire, and as the online media in some ways is designed to be addictive purposely. Eyeballs on screens equals money. So where's and that's what we haven't yet found, I guess, in a larger society. There were people down here, we get the microphone. You could throw it, some people online.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I'm not sure if this is a common question either, but there's so much excitement coming out of what we're talking about here. I too came from a city background, and I didn't go camping until I was 25. But what I did have, and what I was recorded in my life was I was always, so I was always learning. And I think bottom line is what I'm hearing and seeing in our children and our youth growing up is the results of this massive focus on things other than outside of themselves. So outside of their technology, outside of what they're doing right there and there. I fear that they don't know how to communicate. I fear that they don't know how to problem solve. Those are my fears. So I'm not afraid of technology. And I don't think we're afraid of the technology so much as what's going on with this obsession of it. And how we're going to have the next generation be able to problem solve where we really need it, where it's needed to be. And the other thing that I always thought of when David was speaking was, when I did get in the outdoors, that was it. I was fully absorbed. But I met some incredible silent leaders, and that's what I would call it. And these are people that were in my life, not just parents, but people who taught me about the outdoors and taught me to think critically. These people were silent leaders. They were leading me, but allowing me to learn those, the path, the way to do it. And I think that's where we can help, even if we don't have knowledge of the outdoors, that unstructured time. So I have 3.5-year-olds, and so many of my friends with similar ages, they're working full time and then they're structuring their children's lives. They're exhausted. So playing doesn't necessarily mean nature. For me, it does personally, but I don't think it has to. I think that's a big part of it, and I think that connection to nature can come from gaining that confidence of being able to problem solve and think critically. If you can form the base of that, then you can allow someone to make that connection.
Very nice, thank you. Any comments from the panel? We can get another question. In the front here, then we'll go back to you in the back there, okay? Yeah, right here first, and then we'll go back there. Try to tee up a few things as we go. Well, any comments from the previous one? Keep going? Okay. Whoosh.
I want to, wow, this goes with the comment that was.
It's the furnace. Can't turn the heat on.
85-year-old old friend.
It'll take a moment for it to go off. It's the furnace, the electric furnace.
She takes public transportation or she can't drive any longer. In the old days, we all chatted as strangers while waiting for the bus. Well, that's no longer possible because everybody's got stuff plugged in their ears and little things to type with their hands. And she said, and it's hard to translate because it's very quite in German. She said, but you know, they can't hear the wind rustling in the leaves any longer. That really hit me. When you're plugged in with your auditory system, you're no longer able to perceive. I mean, you can stand in a perfectly ordinary bus stop, and yes, you could possibly hear the wind rustling through the leaves of the tree, the motion of the tree. And when that's missed, when that's lost, there's a huge loss. I wonder, for myself, growing up, my freedom, I always played from being in water. I would sneak out in the middle of the night and go swimming at 2 in the morning for an hour or two. It never occurred to me that there would be any safety risk to that. Or live next to a quarry, especially in lightning storms. I really like swimming in lightning storms because it's certain risks related to that. And today I really like the passage for young people as well as one long open ocean routes to promote marine protected areas and marine sanctuaries. I'm just very curious, where is that instinct? My children did not pick up the instinct from me, and part of me gives me a complete failure as a parent. Why was I not able to pass this on? The sense of, if you want to claim freedom, well, then head out in the middle of the night and go walking in the trees, throw yourself in the ocean. How do you pass that on?
What are you feeding them? Oh, it is a tough question. Like some children just have that urge to break free. But that's a very beautiful story that you told us. You know, I've tried to listen to music out in the city, and there's just so much more going on than I'm missing out on.
I come at this from a sort of interesting point of view because I had a son when I was younger who was raised in a very natural environment in a remote bay on a small island. And then now I'm raising a daughter in the city of Victoria. And I'm so struck by the difference in terms of how they spend their daily lives. And even we do get back to the island and I just open the door and they let my daughter out and she plays from dawn to dusk. I just sort of put a dish out every once in a while. And, but so when I'm shocked at the amount of time I allow my daughter to be on, the amount of screen time I allow her versus what I allow my son. And because of our busy urban lives. But one thing that I do really appreciate is the integration, the bringing in, first of all, that nature isn't, I think we need to remind ourselves that nature isn't out there, it's right here. And the thing that I appreciate in the urban environment, the things I feel that have come before me and that support me as a parent with a child and trying to help her see nature is the things that people have done before. The planting of trees on the street, the lack of fence in the front yard so that she can run through the front yards on her way to school. The part of the playground at the school that has been left wild and rocky and that she can climb on and that isn't all flat with cement. And I think there's ways that we can, as individuals, I think that's a really good way that we can support parents and kids, is by integrating those things when we can, putting a tree out, planting the verge. We have a neighbor who does a big vegetable garden on the verge, and it's just such a rich part of our urban life is to just be able to walk through those spaces. Just the way that it's integrated into our daily lives, I think, is very, a great thing.
That was a comment from the far back. I just have a quick comment that I hope is kind of useful for everyone here. And a question for the panel. I grew up, I think, different than the majority of 27-year-olds within Canada. I've been fortunate to grow up, so. I grew up on Anaheim Lake and was born in Bella Coola, and until I was 11 years old, I didn't have electricity, never saw TV, besides going to a friend's house and going to town. Not by choice of my parents, just because my mother was a teacher and my dad was a cowboy, and that's how they met, and they just didn't want to leave. And I grew up very much in touch with nature, and very used to how violent nature is. We had pigs, we had chickens, we also had a trap line, we would hunt. And I think that where people have this romantic notion that being with nature is just kind of nice, it's green, it's both there. But I think having kids in touch with kind of the harshness of nature at times, of seeing, how you get chicken or how you get beef, they kind of see how it's there. Those images in my mind from being 3 years old to seeing my dad slaughter the pigs are forever etched in there. I see the violence that's there to get to. And I have a great appreciation for it. And I think that we are largely not in touch with that. We're removed from it. I was a part of a Native commission and commentary at a convention, and one of the guys up there, one of the elders up there, he said one of the funniest things, and one of the most, I think, purposeful things on how nature should be brought back in this world. And he said he was talking to his grandson, and he was walking with his grandson, and his grandson is now 23, and he's in university, and well, and he's like, well, okay, he's like, what kind of food that is? Could your teachers tell you what kind of food that is? He's like, no, that's a whitetail. He walks along, could your teachers tell you what kind of food that is? No, they probably couldn't. And so he goes on telling various animals, and he goes, and why would you listen to somebody who doesn't know shit? I think the green movement is very meaningful, but I think that there's a misconnection that we're not aiming the kids to the wholeness of nature, to see the violence and what you can learn from it. And my question to the panel, hopefully that was a useful comment. I don't want to take up anyone's time, but I'm interested in education. And I was wondering, what do you think the education process of bringing kids back to nature will be like in 20 years from now? Will be teaching, hopefully, if the people retire.
So now, because of the problems with the mic, was the question? Great story. Was it, what do we think what bringing children back to nature will be like in 20 years? Okay. Maybe we'll have that as the last question, because we're getting close to 9:30, and I think Mandy it's time to start.
Maybe 3 or 4 more questions.
4 more questions? Okay. So any comments about what will be the nice vision of 20 years from now?
I think lots of kids will be able to identify shit. I really think that what you're speaking about there is these appropriate encounters with the natural processes of being alive in this world. I think that's maybe somewhat missing right now, and that's going to be part of that evolution of outdoor education, where we look at what does it mean to kind of emerge from being a young child to a child that has that sense of mastery and searching for autonomy, and then into adolescence and into adulthood, and how as elders in our society can we set up meaningful gateways, so to speak, where people can have those moments of recognition of their own mortality or their own power to kill. I think that will go a long way in terms of people developing a sense of empathy and sustainable culture. So, largely, I think we could say that our culture is still stuck at that adolescent stage where we have yet to really look deeply at our own sense of violence and our ability to take life, and what would we be like if we had ways to. I think many of us in our room have had that, but I think it's not very institutionalized, or it's not a part of our culture.
There's nothing X-rated in nature. All you have to do is present nature to children, and they'll ask the questions, and they'll form their own ideas. I was 8 years old when I killed my first bird, and it was almost by accident. And when that bird died, something in me snapped, and I said, I don't need to do that again. I learned my lesson. But if we don't let children learn lessons at their own pace, then they're going to go to video games, and they're going to want to slaughter people. And we saw those images on the screen, and they shocked me. I didn't have video games like that. I had Frogger. But you have to give children the opportunity to learn at their own pace so that they don't want to follow through on violent tendencies when they're adults. And in nature, there's nothing more fascinating than seeing something dead or something got pooped out, and they're great lessons. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Microphone coming here.
I guess this balance of nature reminds me, we've had recently, a few years ago, a tremendous controversy and an awful lot of resources addressed to the fact that we had bunnies up at university. Now the crisis is we have deer in Oak Bay. And the balance between people that are trying to protect any living creature when they don't belong, is, to me, it's nature gone awry. We don't recognize, I think it's misconstruing what nature is about when they're trying to protect every deer, every rabbit, anything that moves in places that don't belong. And, it's not just the eating our roses, that's the nuisance, but I think our farmers are finding great damage to their crops, and they can't do anything about it because of the ethic about, we can't have an emphasize here.
So that's a really good point. We don't want to give a bastardized sense of our place in nature. And obviously humans are not the protectors of nature. Nature is the protectors of us. And when I go out to meet landowners, they have these questions. Well, I want to keep the deer out of my yard. I want to keep those rabbits from girdling the trees. Yeah, but there's many landowners who say, well, I'm quite proud of the fact that we've got deer in the backyard, and I feed them and I get more deer. But when people look at overpopulations of deer and rabbits and geese and think that that's an indicator of ecosystem health, we have a very perverse view of nature. And that's what the Land Trust is trying to do, is blow up those myths.
Thanks. So, blow up those myths. Violence. Nature. So we have a Twitter comment. We have this gentleman with the hat on here, and then a gentleman next to him. And then that might be about wrap it up at that point. So, the Twitterverse comment? Nature Liz?
No, this is from, we have many people I want to just point out on Twitter tonight. So,
great.
Let's hear it for the Twitter spirit. This one comes from her handle is Real Parenting. She's asking for suggestions about how do parents pass on an appreciation for nature.
That's sure correct. The appreciation of nature, I guess I was saying. How do they pass it on? I think just being passionate about it, letting them see you learn about it. I often don't know the answers to a lot of the questions that children ask me, and we learn them together. And just showing them how excited I am when they find something. Just be excited, want to share with them. Play outside as well. Play is huge. I think that just does it.
One of the great philosophers of the 20th century was an English guy named Alfred North White, a great metaphysician. But he wrote about education, and he talked about the rhythm of education. And the rhythm of education, he said, begins with what he calls the stage of romance. That the only stuff we're really willing to learn, in a big L kind of learning, is stuff we fall in love with. And when we fall in love with it, he says the second stage is the stage of precision, where we fall in love with things, and now we want to know the names of those trees. No one's making them learn. It's like little kids and dinosaurs. I used to do dinosaur research when I worked at the museum here. Little kids, 7-year-olds, 35 species of dinosaurs. They can't wipe their bottoms successfully, and they know huge words, right? Because they've fallen in love with it. And I think that how parents not having to know everything, immigrant parents, as we had the first, from the first Twitter question, who may not be comfortable, but if they can share a curiosity and really a desire to know and to have that romantic relationship with things around them, even with those goofy deer we have even in James Bay now, then I think that leads to other things. Whitehead talks about romance, precision, and the last stage of this cycle of learning he talks about is the stage of generalization, where we love things, we learn the details, and then we want to put them into the bigger picture and we fall in love again. I think that's really a big part. Young man over here.
Hey, my name's Isaac. So I had a friend who used to live in the Yukon, and he lived there for 3 years or so in the middle of his high school life or career, or whatever you want to call it. And he talks about how most of the people he knew, their relationships with nature was in either really cold weather, in the middle of the bush getting shit-faced, or in the middle of the summer when it's light pretty much all night, getting shit-faced. So how can we create space for people to, up north, to want to be in the environment that they live in and not just be there for money reasons and not just get unhealthily drunk and be unsafe?
Go ahead, David, take it.
Great question, Isaac. No, I think about my friend Trevor Bennett, who's doing some really beautiful work up in the north, working with Indigenous elders around traditional ecological knowledge and how they're getting that knowledge and combining that with scientists from different academic institutions and getting the youth involved in rediscovering their land, their culture, their ways. And that's one of the most powerful examples I've seen of giving these youth opportunities that are different than going out and hanging out with their friends and getting shit-faced, as you say. And so I was really so inspired to hear that example from Trevor. And that gives me a lot of hope that there are many ways that people can fall in love, as you're saying, but it does take effort and energy and resources and commitment.
And it takes one has to find some sense of meaning in those places that one lives in. And I think the alienation from the places we live in, the alienation from that sense of meaning that we should be able to derive from those places, leads to self-destructive behaviors and the desire to find other things that are going to make my brain kind of whiz around, which would be like what you're describing. You've lived up north.
I lived up north and I was a teacher, and I am a teacher. And one thing, some of the children were fully immersed in their environment and went out hunting with their families, and nature was very much part of their lives. And other children, they were sitting in front of a computer screen at home all day or playing video games. And one thing that we did as teachers, we came together as a community, and we did a lot of team teaching, and we found things that the children were interested in outside. So all of a sudden, for about 3 weeks straight, we were seeing owls every single day on the power lines just outside of the school. And the kids were fascinated by why were these owls out there. And so we took their fascination and ran with it, and we were dissecting owl pellets, and we were learning all the different owl calls, and we went to a forest research center and we saw where they had nesting boxes for the owls and learned all about them. And this was all kid-driven, and they were just so excited and passionate about it. It was we did that with animal tracking, because we were in the wintertime, we were noticing the animals, or we were noticing tracks in the snow, and we were curious as to what they were, and it led to the kids learning how different animals move differently, and we practiced moving like them. And so there's lots of opportunities for educators to take the learning that is traditionally sometimes inside, outside, and grow their passion that way.
You got it.
All right, my name is Eric. I'm also a teacher, just like everybody else in the room. And one thread I saw came up in the family story about the elder and what is your university professor teaching you. It's the art of questioning, the answer to the lady wondering why her children hadn't picked up that same passion and question from the Twitter is how can we pass it on? How are we asking those questions? How are we responding to their questions? Beyond one of the film in the movie, John Young talks in some of his very topical part of the question. And I just really that's really about what my university professors are teaching me really struck home as I finished my last classes of my undergrad. So I would say that would be the answer I heard in the conversation today, is the questions we ask and that we listen to, and if we never stop, we'll have in 20 years education where we're not teaching them, but they're teaching themselves. We're teaching together, we can teach them.
And I guess, since many of us here must have some interest in education, I guess the next step of all of this is to think, what do we do? And there are probably a lot of ideas, and some of you may want to stick around and we can talk further around this. I think that we have a model now in Southern Vancouver Island in terms of the public school system with the Nature Kindergarten. There are great educators scattered around the school system who have been involved for years and decades in environmental education, community-based outdoor education. I think that those people need to be encouraged more, and the rest of us need to support school districts and school principals who are willing to step out of the norm and give permission for their staff to do these kinds of things. And I think the work that folks here down at David's doing with Howard B, which is fabulous, and the work that Hat and all the other angles in the region, Sierra Club and others, we're all doing work to engage kids in their community, in their place, and in nature, understand nature, the stuff that we need to support. So I'd like to thank these folks. I'd like to thank Mandy for
putting on Open Space, Open Cinema, and especially Pat for providing, and Adam, where he went for providing them with film tonight. Thank you all very much.
So thank you so much, Rick. A big round of applause to Rick for some great moderation. And thank you again to Lisa and to Todd and to David. And thank you to all of you for coming out. We have one little step before we end, but I also want to thank the Twitter sphere and the Ustream sphere. We have 3 guests on Ustream, so thanks to the virtual audiences for being part of this. But one last step, Global Village Store is our sponsor, and they provide us with speaker gifts. So I'm just going to pass this box to you, and you can each pick one. They're all kind of mystery gifts, but that's a sort of small token of our appreciation for you guys coming here and animating our conversation tonight. One big round of applause. We're and yes, the bar is still open if you want to talk more. We'll just sort of close the official thing, the official proceedings down, and we wish you all a safe ride home and smell the flowers on your way home. Thanks so much. Hope to see you next month on December 5th. Bye.